You're still watching the Afia Business Morning. Welcome to Global Business, where we will take a look at business news stories around the continent of Africa and indeed the rest of the world. My name is Ubong Kings, and here are the headlines making the rounds. To start off in Africa, where it's reported that South Africa's new government is to fix the country's energy sector. European Union member states to back tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. And still from the foreign scene, British Airways owner withdraws from Air Europa. We'll bring you details of these news stories and more right after this break. Stay tuned. You're still watching Global Business right here on the Afia Business Morning, and we begin with business stories from Africa, where it's reported that the South Africa's new government of national unity is said to have no more urgent and obvious priority than fixing the country's energy system due to years of increasingly dire power outages known locally as load shedding, which has brought the South African economy to its knees, where these semi-planned blackouts sometimes leave households without power for several hours per day. Meanwhile, the South Africa Reserve Bank predicts that they will cut 0.6 percentage points from GDP growth this year, stating that the frustration and inconvenience incurred by South Africans are almost impossible to keep. Something fundamental in this conversation. I'm not surprised that, as thought, really, the failure to ensure a reliable power supply has been perhaps the single largest reason why the African National Congress ANC lost popular support, even though load shedding had eased, considerably since the beginning of this year, 2024. But then, quite a number of other things come out. One of the things, case in point, would be a report that was put together on this same subject matter by SABC News. Let's take a look at it, and when we come back, we'll discuss a lot more. Stay.
Tswane gathered industry experts and role players in the energy space this week as the country ushers in a new administration to move South Africa forward. The country has made significant progress to overcome the rolling blackouts that have characterized the local economy for the past 15 years. The energy sector is the bedrock of the country's economy, and calls for policy certainty continue to grow louder going into the government of national unity.
What is important from a policy point of view is certainty and stability. That is very important, that what government is currently doing in terms of the policy framework, that there is no significant disruptions around that, because the investors and other players in this space are looking for that.
The country has legislation in place. Among those is the Renewable Energy Master Plan. The Energy Council believes the country must tap into a mixed bag of technology and energies in championing integration for the future.
We do have a mixed bag, a view of a mixed bag of technologies and the different forms of energy and the role that they can play jointly. I know that the new legislation will require the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to provide or produce an integrated energy plan. They currently produce an integrated resource plan which focuses very much on the provision of electricity. So in future we're going to see this integrated energy plan that looks at how all the different forms of energy can come in, the role they play.
The South African Independent Power Producers Association believes the formation of a multi-party governance presents an opportunity for collaboration. The body is also calling for policy certainty and is urging the President to speedily sign the Electricity Regulations Amendment Bill into law to accelerate energy security. The bill will allow for independent power producers to access the country's electricity grid.
Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill has been passed by both houses of Parliament. It's been sitting on the President's desk. There are certain things that should actually be implemented a little bit later, but it's about to be implemented, and that provides the legislative framework for the unbundling of Eskom, the creation of the National Transmission Company of South Africa, in electricity parlance the TSO, the Transmission System Operator. That is the owner of the grid, the facilitator, the system operator and the market.
There are also talks of the country building on its energy infrastructure with a future skills base in mind.
We also have, for instance, our South Africa Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is a very, very good document. It was very consultative, which talks to how we see South Africa progressing in terms of our renewable energy builds over the years and what we want to achieve. Things like jobs in the areas where we're going to decommission coal plants. So, for instance, in Mpumalanga is highlighted as a hotspot for job creation for young people particularly. So that's sitting in the SARM.
Energy experts believe this will be a tough balancing act as to who occupies what position, with expectations being that of a continuation in policy around energy and the economy.
So South Africa finds itself in uncharted territory, right? This is the first time where the policy will be decided by this government of national unity. One assumes that there will be some kind of a continuation, but of course when you have numerous parties coming on board, you then have to sacrifice certain experiences for, maybe what is more popular, and you need to balance what the economy wants versus what people want. Our economy literally relies on the electricity, and this is why we have seen such low to zero economic growth over the last decade, purely because the electricity is not there.
Municipalities like the city of Tshwane are also pushing for energy independence from Eskom, and they are hopeful that their efforts will align with plans of the government of national unity.
Now, I simply guess that the prayer and aspiration will be that of sustainability and pretty much eradication of corruption in the energy sector of South Africa. To move it on to other business news stories, and this time around from the world of automobiles, the European Union capitals are prepared to back the introduction of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, which could come into force in November after a vote in late October, said Valdis Dombrovskis, the European Commissioner for Trade. Meanwhile, at the start of July, the European Union decided to impose provisional tariffs on electric vehicles made in China in the range of 17.4% to 37.6%, which was on top of a 10% duty already imposed on Chinese auto imports. Now, let's look at the story real quickly. This is not really news on one side, because rumors had already been all over the place about new tariffs imposed on Chinese electric vehicles, of course, by the European Union. And this news, the news really is the fact that this is now a reality. Now, we're going to take a look at a certain report as put together by EV's Queen, and she captured this development very fantastically in this report. Let's take a look.
The European Union has raised tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles as Brussels takes action to protect the bloc's motor industry. The new tariffs on individual manufacturers range from 17.4% to 37.6%, which is on top of a 10% duty that was already in place for all electric cars imported from China. This could raise the price of EVs across the EU, making them less affordable for European consumers. The move is also a major blow for Beijing, which is already in a trade war with Washington. The EU is the largest overseas market for China's EV industry, and the country is counting on high-tech products to help revive its flagging economy. EU officials say this rise in imports was boosted by unfair subsidization, which allowed China-made EVs to be sold at much lower prices than ones produced in the bloc. China has denied this repeated allegation from the US and the EU. They are not likely to be imposed until later this year. So who are the potential winners and losers in this trade dispute? It is not just Chinese brands that are affected by the move. Western firms that make cars in China have also come under scrutiny by Brussels. By imposing tariffs, Brussels says it is attempting to correct what it sees as a distorted market. The EU's decision may seem tame compared to a recent US move to raise its total tariffs to 100%, but it could be far more consequential. Chinese EVs are a relatively rare sight on US roads, but much more common in the EU. The number of EVs sold by Chinese brands across the EU rose from just 0.4% of the total EV market in 2019 to almost 8% last year, according to figures from the influential Brussels-based Green Group Transport and Environment, TAND. Patrick Krupkala, an architect from Poland, who expects to take delivery of a brand new China-made MG4 in 2 weeks, told the BBC, "I have chosen an MG4 because it is quite cheap. It is a really fast car, and it's a rear-wheel drive like my previous car, which was BMW E46. Tan projects firms like BYD and Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, SAIC, the Chinese owner of the formerly British brand MG, could reach a market share of 20% by 2027. But not all Chinese-made EVs will be hit equally by the new tariffs. They were calculated based on estimates of how much state aid each firm received, while companies that cooperated with the probe saw the duties they were hit with cut. Between 2009 and 2023, more than $230 billion, £181 billion, of state support was pumped into the industry. As a result, its EV industry has become world-leading. The International Energy Agency says China accounted for more than 60% of the world's new electric car sales last year. While the vast majority of EVs produced in China are sold domestically, overseas markets, and particularly Europe, have become increasingly important.
This move, if you ask me, has sparked quite a lot of rage and anger in Beijing, specifically with supporters of this levy, claiming that it's essential to protect European Union manufacturers against unfair competition. However, in China has rejected its claims, arguing that its industry flourished naturally. We'll get to see how all of this pans out eventually, because of course we'll give you updates as they unfold right here on Global Business. You're still watching Global Business right here on the Afia Business Morning on Afia TV. You may want to kindly join in this conversation and more on our dedicated Afia Business YouTube channel. Kindly tap in the search bar www.youtube.com/@Afia Business. While you're there, do well to like and engage in any of the videos and subscribe for notifications on all business related content coming to you from Afia TV. Up next will be more business news stories from the rest of the world right after this break. Stay tuned. You're welcome back to the Afia Business Morning right here on Afia TV, and you're watching Global Business. Now we're moving to the rest of our stories. And this time around, we're going to the world of aerospace, where it's reported that the International Airlines Group, owner of Aer Lingus, British Airways and Iberia, has again withdrawn from its takeover bid of 400 million euros for Spanish airline Air Europa, which is the second time it has done so, as it had offered a series of concessions to the EU regulators, including giving up takeoff and landing slots to competitors, while the regulators still saw the bid as potentially anti-competitive. Meanwhile, IAG already owns 20% of Air Europa, with the remaining 80% belonging to Global. Welcome back. Sincere apologies for that short break. And I was talking just before the break, I was talking about the fact that International Airlines Group, the owner of Aer Lingus, British Airways and Iberia, is again withdrawn, so to speak, from its takeover bid of 400 million euros of Spanish airline Air Europa. And for the sake of context, apparently there is a fine for not going through with this deal. And it may interest you to know that IAG will be at the losing end of this. As this is put together by a report by Airlines Quest. Let's take a look at this, and when we come back, we'll try to wrap this up.
International Airlines Group, or IAG, has abandoned its plan to acquire Air Europa, sending shockwaves through the aviation industry. Today, we're diving deep into this major development and what it means for the future of European air travel. IAG, the powerhouse behind British Airways and Iberia, had its sights set on Spain's third-largest carrier, Air Europa. This deal would have been a game-changer, potentially transforming Madrid into a major hub rivaling Europe's biggest airports. But sometimes, even the best-laid plans hit unexpected turbulence. Let's break down what happened. IAG saw Air Europa as their ticket to dominating the Spanish market and opening up lucrative long-haul routes to Asia. It seemed like a match made in aviation heaven. But the European Union's regulators weren't ready to clear this flight for takeoff. They raised red flags about reduced competition and potentially higher fares for passengers. IAG tried to smooth things over by offering to give up over half of Air Europa's flights to competitors. A pretty big concession in the high-stakes world of airline mergers. Despite these efforts, it looks like the regulators were about to ground this deal permanently. Facing this regulatory headwind, IAG's board of directors decided to pull the plug on the acquisition. This decision comes with a hefty price tag, a €50 million termination fee. But it's not a total loss for IAG, as they'll keep their existing 20% stake in Air Europa. This failed merger highlights a broader debate in European aviation. On one side, we have airline executives arguing that more consolidation is necessary for survival and growth. They claim it would help smaller airlines scale up and reduce the need for government bailouts during tough times.
Okay, now you get the idea. But then the interesting part of this whole thing is the fact that, for the records, IAG would still pay the sum of, rather be compared, let me use the right word, would be compelled to pay this sum of €50 million break fee to Globalia as compensation for not going through with the deal. Okay, I'll allow you to think about that for a bit. Okay, you are trying to get a company, but well, you still pay money for not getting the company. Okay, we'll follow up on these stories as they unfold, as well as other stories right here on the Global Business. You may want to get to our dedicated Afio Business YouTube channel to be part of the conversation. Kindly type in the search bar www.youtube.com/Afio Business. While you're there, do well to like and subscribe for notifications on all business-related content coming to you from Afia TV. You're still watching the Afia Business Morning live on Afia TV. Coming up next will be a conversation on a couple of statements by former President Olusegun Obasanjo alleging that cabals are undermining the $20 billion Dangote refinery. The Afia Business Morning, we'll be right back after now. My name is Ubong Kings. Stay tuned.